She was a journalist with a sharp pen and an unshakable bias, a voice that often stoked division. Her articles painted entire communities with fear and suspicion. But everything changed when she was assigned a story she didn't want to cover, an immigrant neighborhood she had openly criticized. What started as a reluctant task quickly turned into something far more profound. Face to face with the people she once feared, she began to see beyond the headlines and stereotypes she had built her career on. Each conversation chipped away at her preconceptions, leaving her questioning not only her beliefs, but her very identity. What was it about these individuals that changed her so deeply? And how did a single assignment become the turning point of her life? Stick around as we explore this extraordinary transformation of a journalist and the power of human connection. She walked into the neighborhood with a notebook in hand and skepticism in her heart. The narrow streets were alive with vibrant colors, the smell of home-cooked food drifting through the air, and the sound of unfamiliar languages blending together. To her, it felt chaotic, almost intimidating. She kept her distance, observing from the shadows, convinced she knew what she would find. But then came the first encounter. An older man at a small cafe who insisted she sit and share a cup of tea. He spoke softly, telling stories of his family, his struggles, and his dreams for a better life. His words didn't match the image she'd held onto for so long. She tried to brush it off as an exception, but the same warmth and kindness met her at every turn. It was unsettling, and she wasn't ready to admit why. As days turned into weeks, she found herself drawn deeper into the neighborhood, her notebook now filled with stories she hadn't expected to hear. There was the single mother juggling 2 jobs while still finding time to organize community events. The teenager who dreamed of becoming a doctor despite the prejudice he faced at school. And the shop owner who offered free meals to those in need, no questions asked. Each story painted a picture so different from the one she had been clinging to. But the conflict inside her grew louder. How could she reconcile these experiences with the articles she had written, the opinions she had shaped for years? She felt a strange mix of guilt and defensiveness, afraid to admit she might have been wrong. Could she really face the consequences of challenging her own beliefs? Or was it too late to change? One evening, as she walked through the streets with her recorder, she came across a gathering in the local community center. Curiosity got the better of her, and she slipped inside, blending into the crowd. The room was buzzing with energy, people of all ages, backgrounds, and stories coming together to discuss issues affecting their neighborhood. She stayed quiet, just listening, her preconceptions unraveling with every word. Then came the moment that stopped her cold. A young man stood up and spoke about how media coverage had painted their community as dangerous and unwelcome. His voice trembled with frustration, but his words carried a weight that pierced through her defenses. She knew he was talking about people like her. The room turned silent, and her chest tightened as shame crept in. What if they found out who she was? Could she face the truth about herself? Her heart raced as she quietly slipped out of the meeting, overwhelmed by what she had heard. She thought she could observe from a distance, remain detached, but now she felt exposed, like a fraud standing on shaky ground. That night, she couldn't sleep. The faces, the voices, the young man's piercing words haunted her. Why had she been so quick to judge? What was she so afraid of? The next morning, she resolved to dig deeper, not just into their stories, but into her own fears. She decided to meet with the young man who had spoken out. But when she arrived at his family's small restaurant, she was met with cold stares. Someone had uncovered her past articles, and word had spread. She felt the weight of their distrust, their pain, and for the first time, she realized she had more to lose than her pride. She stood frozen in the doorway, the weight of their stares making her feel smaller than she ever had. For a moment, she considered walking away, but something inside her pushed forward. Slowly, she introduced herself, not as the journalist they had every reason to mistrust, but as someone trying to understand what she had ignored for so long. The room remained silent until the young man from the meeting stepped forward. "You're the one who wrote those articles," he said, his voice steady but laced with hurt. She didn't deny it. Instead, she admitted the truth, how her fear had blinded her, how meeting them had changed everything. The room softened, though the tension lingered. He nodded slowly and offered her a seat. They talked for hours, uncovering shared pain, misunderstandings, and surprising common ground. By the end, she knew her transformation wasn't just about telling their stories. It was about changing how she told every story moving forward. But as she left, she noticed a faded sign in the window. "Help wanted." The young man's voice echoed in her mind. Asterisk, "If you really want to understand us, come back and stay longer." Asterisk. She couldn't shake his words as she walked home that night. The sign in the window felt like more than an offer. It felt like a challenge. A week later, she returned, not as a journalist, but as a volunteer in the restaurant. She worked alongside them, learning their recipes, their stories, and their struggles firsthand. Each day brought new lessons, not just about their lives, but about her own prejudices and the power of empathy. When her article finally went live, it wasn't just about the neighborhood. It was a raw, honest reflection of her journey. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in, some challenging her, others thanking her for speaking out. But the most meaningful response came from the young man. "You finally told the truth," he said with a small smile, and for the first time, she felt free.